The preceding message was furnished by Major League Baseball.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Not Content Podcast. My name is Jerome Cuson, part of the From the Cube podcasting network. As always, I am joined by Brian. And Brian, this is our first time recording since WrestleMania weekend. I know that you had a very busy weekend going to Las Vegas, but not actually going to WrestleMania. And so we've had to take a little bit of time to just, let us cool off a little bit. But we are back for one last episode in the month of April. We are going to be discussing kind of, what could be construed as a deleted scene or scenes from Ken Burns' baseball. Ken Burns, one of the more notable omissions is any discussion of Fernando Mania, and that is what we are going to do here tonight. Brian, this one's for you, I would say, because you are all about the Dodgers. You are all about Fernando Mania, and so this is your time to shine.
For sure, and I think this really highlights the 1981 baseball season a lot more than the documentary that Ken Burns did. I feel like he just kind of skipped over that strike. Because, again, there was a strike in 1981, folks, for about a month, and it kind of affected the playoff formatting, which kind of influenced what the wild card would become later on in the 90s. But in 81, because of the strike, it ended up becoming like a two-season format where they did a season A, season B, and then did rankings based on those two different parts of the season. It's crazy. If you look it up, it's a wild time in baseball for 1981, not just for Fernando, but just this whole baseball strike and what it led to, and then kind of what it leads to in 1995 when they introduced the wild card based off this playoff system they introduced in 81. They only did it one time, folks, and people can kind of say that that's what let the Dodgers kind of get into the playoffs or whatnot, and you can argue that, but at the same time, the Dodgers were really hot anyway with Fernando Mania. Because Fernando Valenzuela had his rookie year in 1981. He had two starts in 1980. But this was the year for Fernando Mania, like the debut year. He went 8 straight of his first starts with wins, which is like a record that I don't think any rookie has touched since. Just a tremendous season. He was doing it with screwballs. He wasn't doing it necessarily with like firepower, which a lot of big guys do. And for guys his size, you would expect that. But he seemed to have control over the ball. And he would mix it up with that kind of fastball, but then that's what kind of led to him getting like 4 or 5 run games later on and having to do complete games. Even though he gives up like 4 or 5 runs, he's still in the game at like the 9th inning. But that's kind of how it was back in the 80s, especially with Tommy Lasorda, who is known for stretching out his starters, and we saw that in the '88 World Series with Oral Hershiser as well. So this story of Fernando Mania kind of has to start out with the beginning of Dodger Stadium, right, Jerome? And Walter O'Malley, the son of a bitch, man, that kicked out so many, Mexican families from their homes. Just a tragedy.
I mean, this is after he turns his back on the city of Brooklyn, which is predominantly black, and he turns his back on them. And he's just a terrible human being and a genuinely terrible person. And when they showed him speaking, giving off a lot of Trump vibes as well, which we're very much used to at this point, but he just comes across. It's a wonder to me that the Dodgers, and I think this is because there's a combination of reasons, obviously being in the second most populous market in the United States at this point, and if this they also have good ownership that clearly wants to spend money now. But you look at what the Dodgers have done in their history, and yes, they've had Jackie Robinson, they've had Fernando Mania. But the way that they have treated, the folks in that area is just really poor. And just, they've done a lot of things. And the latest being, of course, going to the White House as well.
I wouldn't say they were redeemed for anything about the stadium being created. I don't think that's going to ever be forgiven. But at the time of 1981, there was this transitional switch that Fernando Mania did bring, which was from white businessmen to Mexican families, and I think that's a big transition because we're still living in that transition today, where the Dodger fan base primarily has become mostly Latino because of the Mexican heritage that kind of draws back all the way to Fernando Mania, and that one season where all of a sudden like this just cultural shift happens, and then Dodger Stadium is all of a sudden this like beacon and home for like a lot of Latino families and a lot of Latino generations of Dodger fans throughout the years. So it's this kind of like, this dark history mixed with this prideful history of Mexican culture and heritage that was reflected in those years. But it's just really hard to like kind of look back on. It's very like a mixed bag. It's like almost like a Harry Potter situation. You know what I'm saying? It's like you don't like the creator, but you love the stuff that's been put on the field. So it's a mixed bag. But at the same time, I think they in this documentary directed by Cruz Angeles, I think he did a good job of showing you like what was really going on and when they were building the stadium, and it was really tragic. And it kind of reflected this whole thing about the racism going on, and of course the rise of the kind of like Chicano revolution around a lot of areas in the United States that were heavy with Hispanic folk. So there's a lot of history going on, and of course you got Cesar Chavez, for workers' rights going on at this time as well. And then when Fernando comes in, it's almost as if he becomes like this figure, this representative, but he's not so political. And I think that's kind of the difference where you get like a Jackie Robinson versus a Fernando, where Fernando just wanted to be the best he could be, support his family, blah, blah, blah. But I think that's kind of the difference where I think that Fernando.
I mean, a lot of 1980s athletes kind of fall into this. I don't know if O.J. Simpson had a lot to do with it, but I'm talking about like this idea of being apolitical. And, we have this generation of athletes, Bill Russell, Muhammad Ali, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, very political. And then a generation later, we're talking about, these great athletes that are in no way political, but I think are still important, like Fernando Valenzuela, Michael Jordan. Like these are people who are important, but they don't represent the values that a Bill Russell or people of that generation did. And I mean, I definitely have mixed feelings on it, and certainly Fernando Valenzuela, coming from Mexico the way that he did, and just everything that's going on at that point. Brian, we have our pet phrase that we use seemingly every episode, but one of the things that they mention is the idea that when Reagan comes into office, they start rounding up immigrants and deporting them, and it doesn't feel all that dissimilar from what's happening now with this push. So what's our phrase, Brian? What's our phrase?
The view never changes, Daddy. The view never changes.
It doesn't.
Yeah, I was kind of in shock too. And this was released in 2010. I feel like I shouldn't be as shocked because of the way that just politics go and the ebbs and flows of liberals.
I mean, history is circular, and that's the thing that people like. Everything that happens now has happened before, and I think that that's what people ultimately forget. Like racism changes, it evolves, but it's ultimately the same. And people always want to go back to the Nazis, but I mean, who do you think the Nazis were inspired by? Like they were inspired by this country and the way that we treated black people. So, I don't like, I mean, to be clear, like it's really awful, but don't pretend people should not be shocked is what I'm saying. Is people should not be surprised by the history because it's always been there.
Yeah, and that was really like crucial at the time, especially with this Reaganomics coming in and how that really changed the economics, and a lot of small businesses were affected. The same thing's happening now, folks. So just to let you know, I don't know if I'm not saying it started with Reagan, but obviously those Reaganomics came from other past political influences. So it's all, like you said, cyclical.
I mean, the history of the Republican Party, I mean, it goes back to Goldwater, but really, like, you can trace a lot of really bad stuff to Reagan's run in office from 1981 to 1989. Like, that is a clear delineation point.
Yeah, and they definitely made that and made an effort to show that in the documentary, and I think that's a fair criticism of Reagan's presidencies. And then they kind of get into the statistics of it all in the documentary about how he kind of peaks around 1986, gets injured like around 87, 88. They actually gave him a ring for being on the roster, which you are supposed to do for the 88 season, but he denied it. So I think technically, if you wanna like be really like accurate about it, he only has one World Series ring from 81, and he completely turned down the 88 one. So it's kind of like a commendable, respectable thing, because like there's all these jokes about guys that are on the bench that end up winning titles and rings and really didn't do anything. But in this case, he really wasn't even on the playoff roster, and they still went out to give him a ring, and he's like, I can't take it. It's like I thought that was a really stoic thing to do. And I'll always consider him a one-time World Series winner, even though he wasn't on that 88 roster. Or he was on the roster, he just wasn't on the postseason roster because he was hurt. But still, that season is still magical in itself. But it also kind of shows you that the criticism of Tommy Lasorda might be accurate, Jerome, of pushing his pitchers too far, and we've seen it. Like, it's not like a false statement. We literally saw it in the 80s carry out to 2 World Series wins. But, I mean, Orel Hershiser's career was kind of like, I don't know. He could have been a longer-lasting pitcher, but he really threw his arm out in the 80 World Series, and it felt like Fernando kind of did in 81, even though his stats were really great in 82, 83, 84, 85. And then, the 5 consecutive strikeouts in the All-Star game in 86. It feels like for that 5-year stretch, he was the man. And it just seems like...
I think with Fernando, like, he had a nice little run. Like, I think people, when they think of Fernando Mania, they just think of 81. But really, you look at his statistics those first 5 years, and they're pretty solid. I mean, this isn't like Dwight Gooden, where Dwight Gooden essentially has 2 or 3 good years and then succumbs to a really bad drug habit. Like, Fernando Valenzuela, it's very different. And it's really unfortunate that we didn't get to see him have like a sustained run of 10 to 15 years like we have with somebody like Greg Maddux or, for Roger Clemens, for better or for worse. But, Fernando Mania was kind of fleeting, and certainly the way, look, he threw a pitch that is very difficult to throw, and undoubtedly that has an impact on his arm and his ability to be successful. Plus, let's face it, not the best in shape guy. Like, I'm not saying he has to be like super buff, but I don't know. Physically, was he taking care of himself like he should have been? That could be a part of it as well. But he still had a borderline Hall of Fame career, for sure. And he was clearly misused by Tommy Lasorda as well. It's by the 1980s. We are evolving our thinking about pitchers and the way that we use bullpens. And look, do I think that every pitcher should go out there and throw complete games? No. Do I think every pitcher should we be in a spot where 4 out of the 5 should be throwing 6 and 7 innings? Yes. I think the best thing in life is balance, and it just feels like we're very unbalanced right now. But I would like to see a situation where we have, starters who are capable of going out there and throwing 6, 7 innings. But don't, let's not necessarily expect them to throw complete games either way.
Yeah, in comparison to the Dodgers now, it's like they want their starters to just basically just go 5 innings and let the bullpen do the rest. And as of this recording, they went into the season with like 6 starting pitchers, 4 of them like all-star level caliber pitchers, and 2 of them got injured or were injured still from the previous season. So it's not like having all these pitchers on the payroll is like a big plus. It's like you still need to have them healthy, and that's a big key. Because like if Fernando came around today, I guarantee by the 6th inning he'd be done. Like he'd be just 6 straight innings, get like 7 strikeouts, not nearly have as many strikeouts or the high record numbers that he would have had in 81. But I think his career would probably lasted longer based on that. Like if like Kershaw was probably another good example where he comes in, he's not necessarily throwing complete games all the time, but he's going like 8 innings. And he lasted a lot longer for sure. And he wasn't always throwing gas either. He was throwing off-speed stuff, change-ups, the curveball, obviously. And in this case, Fernando was throwing a lot of screwballs, which is still a tough pitch to throw in even today's baseball. So it really just threw his arm out. And you can see the footage of him like heavily taped up in like 85, 86. And you can tell like if you're heavily taped up at that point, it's like it's almost over. Like the run is almost done. Because like you can't maintain that pace, especially throwing complete games for that long. So it's no wonder he only went in like 5 great seasons and then had a couple downers. But then throwing a no-hitter in 1990, I think shows that like he still had it in him. You know what I mean? He had that Greg Maddux kind of type where you're not throwing for speed anymore at your age. You got to throw off-speed stuff to throw guys off. And, at his age, he had to do that. And I think that was the right game for him to do it with the right team. And it was a memorable moment because it's two no-hitters in a single day. I don't think we've broken that record, Jerome, but we've had more no-hitters in a single season probably since then. Not
A
as
couple
many
of
no
years
hitters
ago,
now.
it feels like we had like we had one like every 2 weeks or something like that. I mean, we
It's
definitely
slowed
have had
down.
some.
It's definitely slowed down, though, I think.
It
But
is
we were in
it
a
is definitely slowed down. I mean, the problem is the guys don't pitch; they throw. I think that's ultimately where that's what the problem is now. Is the guys are throwing way too hard, and that's why these guys are constantly needing Tommy John surgery. I mean, the White Sox had, I think, 6 or 7 guys coming out of spring training needing Tommy John surgery. And I mean, look, they're a really terrible team, but I mean, Tommy John is so common now. It feels like a pitcher's career really hasn't begun until they've had their first Tommy John surgery. And it just sucks, man. It really sucks that, we are losing these pitchers for a year and change to Tommy John surgeries. And it's because, again, these guys are throwing so hard that their bodies can't recover fast enough. And especially now that we have a pitch clock, we can't really, like, they don't have the time to recover their arms within the game. But the other thing is that, like, I don't know that we should. Like, if you need that much time to recover your arm strength, then maybe you need to be taught how to actually locate the ball and not just throw 100 miles an hour because you can. Like, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do it.
totally agree, and I think that's a big thing that pitchers are learning nowadays. And I think I was worried 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, that Tommy John would be such a popular thing that young guys would just do it before they get into the majors, as if like they
Huh.
didn't even it. You know what I'm saying? But it hasn't come to that point yet, and I feel like we're almost at that point because it just feels like you're right. Like every pitcher needs it because they throw their arm out, and
I
they
mean,
do it
guys are
around.
getting. Guys are getting second Tommy John surgeries, and I don't.
Oh, that's insane because now you're just doing.
I don't see how that's a good thing. I mean, you're. I mean, when does it come to a point where guys are losing the use of their arm if they keep having these surgeries? I don't see it.
Yeah, it's very it's very scary kind of thinking about it because I'm even at the point where I'm thinking like Otani. At this point, he hasn't pitched for the Dodgers yet, as of this recording, but I don't think he should. Um, just because I think you need to protect him, and I think throwing as much as he did with the Angels, I just say forget it. Maybe if anything, do a bullpen game and have him do the first 3 innings, and that's it. Don't have him go like 5 or 6. But that's my biggest fear is that he's going to get hurt throwing and not from hitting. But
I mean, he should be.
wood.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you should have him come out of the bullpen as a long reliever or bullpen, or possibly even a closer or something like that. But yeah, I don't. I mean, he's too good of a hitter at this point. Like the way that it feels like, and now it feels like this year he's just being affected by the fact that he's going to pitch, so he's not trying to steal bases as much, and it's just I could see it being aggravating. But Fernando also was apparently a really good hitter. Um, I I I think we got to a point where we just couldn't have pitchers in anymore, just because it got ridiculous because these guys just wouldn't hit. But I don't know. I feel like we lost something a little bit with pitchers not hitting as much because some of these guys were really good at it, and Fernando Valenzuela was one of them.
Yeah, and he wasn't just a guy that was like had a good statistics as the ninth hitter. Like they would actually have him pinch hit. So like it's just crazy to me. That's and some pitchers are like that. I think to this day, but it's just very rarely. But yeah, and it
I
made
mean,
me think.
pitchers don't hit anymore. I mean,
Yeah,
the
but it made
last the
go ahead.
ever since the pandemic, they changed the rule. I think in 2020, because for obvious reasons, and then they just said, we're not going to have pitchers hit anymore. And I mean, it's totally understandable, but I mean, it's both. I think it's better that we have a DH now, but it also feels like we do lose something.
It did make me think of the scout, which I know we've talked about before, and not totally fully focused on it. But the scout is about scouting a player in Mexico, and I couldn't help but think, like, did they just take the Fernando story and replace it with a white guy and just have Brendan Fraser be that guy, and just
I
instead
mean, it's
switch it
certainly
up?
possible.
I mean, because that
Certainly
script
possible.
apparently it had like 5 different rewrites from what I read on Wikipedia, so that could have clearly been originally a Fernando Valenzuela story, and then it just warped into something different. But an also interesting note that this could be urban legend or not, I'm not sure. Maybe it is true, but the facts that got Fernando to sign, the Yankees actually sent an offer a few minutes later via fax, And had the Dodgers not set the facts at that exact time, that he would have went to the Yankees, which adds more to the lore of the 2024 World Series, where just, days before, Fernando unfortunately passed away due to cancer. Um, and, it was just shocking to everyone. It was shocking to me. And then everyone was thinking like, oh my God, they're going to win it for him. And then of course the magic happens, with all the stuff that went on in the World Series. And, it was cool that on November 1st that they gave,
Aaron Judge completely biffing it.
Yeah, that's another thing. But just this idea was the Yankees, the 81 World Series parallels, except this time we were more unparalleled with the 88 World Series, but also just the thought of like Fernando Valenzuela, and then the fact that they had the parade on November 1st, which is his birthday. And this year, like for the entire season, they're having the Fernando Valenzuela number 34 patch in every single jersey throughout the year, which is so awesome. So it's kind of like the year to kind of mourn and honor the man. And he went into the Hall of Fame in 2014. Because this was in 2010, so he wasn't in the Hall of Fame yet. And I know that sounds kind of crazy, but it did take some time for some of those 80s, 90s players who weren't, roid guys get into the Hall of Fame, and he finally got in 2014. At this point now, we're kind of stuck with those roid guys, and that's the problem now, is because everyone else got in, and now we're stuck with the roid guys waiting to get in. So that's kind of the issue. But yeah, so it was cool because, like, again, it's only 5 seasons, but those 5 seasons were incredible. And not only that, like, he held the Dodgers up for money, and they paid him. 2 years in a row he did that. He held them up for the first year or the second year and got like a $300,000 contract.
As he
held
should.
Them up next year, which he should. And he held them up for money the next year, got $1 million, which he should, because
with
it's
the
not
money
like,
he personally sold out that stadium a number of times. He was personally drawing a fan base that never would have ever condescended to go to Dodger games, the Mexican fan base. Like, he personally added fans to that team. And in my opinion, he could have asked for $10 million in 1983, 4, and 5, and probably been worth it, just because, again, he brought a group of fans that never would have attended baseball games if he wasn't a star.
And that's kind of that Vince McMahon senior mentality, where you kind of have to have a star for every nationality, but and not in a way to patronize, but in a way to celebrate, so you can have an identifiable hero, which is totally what this was in the 80s, and it totally worked out, except it just kind of floundered out, but by the end of the 80s. But overall, I think this is a fun watch. I think it's like a 7.5 out of 10 for me. It's only 50 minutes. If you have your ESPN login, it's available for free. I had to borrow my friend's login because I don't have ESPN online, but kind of weird to not find this on the archives. I don't know if the archives are going through some shit right now, but shocked it wasn't on there. But
I found it on Disney Plus, so I
how did you find? I looked for it on Disney Plus, and I couldn't. I don't know.
I just searched Fernando.
I find things on Disney Plus sometimes.
I found it. I searched Fernando Mania, and it was right there.
See, I think my mistake was I started searching for 30 for 30s and got all these results and just
that was your mistake, probably.
Because now there's like God knows how many 30 for 30s, but you got to be selective. You can't watch them all, obviously. And I think this is the ones where I was more personally attached to, so that's why this is more of a memorable 30 for 30 for me.
All right, so we've done our baseball run here. We have talked about Ken Burns. We talked about Fernando Mania. Now, next month, Brian, we are going to be doing something very, very different. There is a character that you have in mind that you want us to take a look at, and 4 very different. Like, this is like, we're going to be looking at the same character, but we are going to be looking at this character through 4 very different lenses.
For sure. So I was born in 88, and when Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves came out in 91, it was kind of like a big movie. I remember watching it as a kid, not understanding much of it, but I remember Alan Rickman, and I remember the goddamn song by Bryan Adams. And of course, years later, I'd watch Men in Tights by Mel Brooks. We
reviewed the 1992 Academy Awards, and we actually heard the song.
Exactly. And of course, when I was in college freshman year, the first time I watched the 1933 version, I was blown away because I couldn't believe how awesome of a Technicolor movie that it was to get the colors so bright for 1933. And like, there's a
1938, by the way.
38, excuse me. I don't know why I say 33 all the time, but it's 39, 38. But it's also got Claude Rains, who's like one of my favorite actors from the classic era.
He's really, really good.
He's so on point in this movie. It's unbelievable. And of course, everyone else is just on point in the original. So we're going to start it with the original from 1938, a classic in my eyes. And then we're going to watch the Disney version. And then, of course, we're going to watch the 1991 version with Kevin Costner, and then we're going to watch Men in Tights, the Mel Brooks version. So you get a very different lens, as you say, for the character of Robin Hood. And so, as you know, we like to do the right match. So for the first, pairing with the Robin Hood from 1938, the idea of stealing from the rich and giving to the poor, that was kind of like my thoughts behind it. So I picked Andre the Giant versus Big John Studd in a body slam $10,000 challenge from WrestleMania 1. And the ending involves kind of that idea of not necessarily stealing, but getting from the rich and giving it to the poor.
We will not get into Errol Flynn's personal life on the Adventures of Robin Hood podcast, but all I'm going to say is if you want to feel really gross, go ahead and read his Wikipedia. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, I'm trying to avoid talking about that. I just want to reflect on the performance that he
gives. Oh, no, the
movie's
great. I feel a contractual obligation to point out just what a terrible person Errol Flynn is.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to. Yeah, I'm just trying to praise his performance, and that's it.
So I am really looking forward. I mean, the 1938 Robin Hood is genuinely great. I really like the Disney version. I really like Men in Tights. It's obviously, much more comedic. Prince of Thieves is a slog, and I am very curious if I'm going to continue to see it as such on this latest viewing, because I've seen it a couple times and I've never really been a fan.
Christian Slater just drops his accent completely, but Alan Rickman just is the ace in the hole, I guess. He's the only one with a really true accent, and he just nails it throughout the whole movie. And, of course, you got Kevin Costner, who just drops it every other scene, which,
I mean, this is Kevin Costner. He is white hot. Like, he is coming off that late 80s run of Field of Dreams and Bull Durham. He wins the Academy Award for Dances with Wolves. Like, this is as big as he has ever been. And, I mean, it's not a blank check movie. He did not direct this, right?
No, but it's also it's like a weird relationship with the director. I forget his name, but he ended up working with him on something else, and that one I think he did Waterworld with him next.
Oh man,
and their relationships went out the window. Yeah, it was bad. It was bad, but they felt like they had to work together on Waterworld because this was so successful despite the reviews. So
yeah, which we'll see how this goes, but yeah, that's next month we'll be looking at Robin Hood. In the month of May Marian, I guess. May Marian.
That's what I was kind of thinking, Jerome, but I haven't officially come up with a full title yet. When I type out the description, that'll be final.
And yeah, we'll talk about what's coming up for June, something very special for June forthcoming. But for Brian, I'm Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you again next week.